I'm going to give you a hypothetical scenario here. This game right here is the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the New England Patriots over in London during the 2024 season. This was a game that, in no uncertain terms, the Jaguars had to have in order to have any shot at keeping their season alive. The Jaguars entered this game with a 1-5 record, and if they dropped to 1-6, their season was completely toast. At 2-5, with how uncompetitive the AFC South is, and only being 2 out of the wildcard hunt, you've still got a shot if everything falls your way. But at 1-6, your season is over, and it's time to do some soul searching. Sure enough, the Jaguars won this game, taking it by a final score of 32-16. In a game where Trevor Lawrence played lights out, Tank Bigsby was an absolute beast on the ground, Brian Thomas Jr. made some great catches, and Gabe Davis existed. Now I want you to imagine that after this game right here, head coach Doug Peterson spoke in his press conference and completely unprompted said to the press, "This is the biggest win in franchise history." You'd look at the man as if he had 5 heads. You're telling me this game, this Week 7 game, that improved your record at 2-5 and didn't put you in the playoffs if the season ended today and still kept you under 500 is the biggest win in franchise history? Bigger than the divisional round game in 1996 against Denver? Bigger than the 62-7 win against Miami in the divisional round in 1999? Bigger than the regular season win against Atlanta in 1996 to get you to the playoffs for the first time? Bigger than the 27-0 comeback in the wildcard round against the Chargers in the 2022 season? This game was the biggest? Come on, just come on. I know that things like this are subjective, and there's no definitive right answer, but there are a bunch of definitive wrong ones, and this would definitely be a wrong one. Well, as bizarre and as crazy as that hypothetical sounds, this man that you're looking at right now is Arizona Cardinals kicker Greg Davis. And to say that he got a little bit ahead of himself with his reaction to a win would be putting it lightly. Davis was a solid kicker in the NFL for a long period of time. He played 12 seasons in the league, and by the time he last played in 1998, he was inside the top 20 in NFL history in career field goals made. No one's saying that Greg Davis is a Hall of Famer by any means, but the man could play. You don't hit 224 career field goals by complete accident. I'll put it that way. But even though the man was a pretty good kicker, he was not a pretty good historian, because in 1994, he decided to say one of the dumbest things imaginable that deserves a deep dive today, more than 3 decades later. Because this is the story behind Greg Davis, and the game that he thought was, legitimately, the biggest win in the history of the Cardinals franchise. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about Greg's gigantic gaffe. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and just what exactly Greg Davis said that left everyone scratching their head and wondering whether he was actually from this planet or not, we need some context to understand the importance of the game, as well as how the game itself went. It's November 20th, 1994. It's Week 12 of the NFL season, and we've got a big NFC East battle on our hands between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Arizona Cardinals. Yes, the Cardinals, despite playing in Arizona, were in the NFC East back then. Geography was not the NFL's strong suit in the 1990s. To say that this was a must-win for the Cardinals would be putting it lightly, as they enter this one with a disappointing 4-6 record. Mainly because, while their defense was really strong and was your typical Buddy Ryan defense, their offense was really poor and was your typical Buddy Ryan offense. Speaking of Buddy Ryan, not only was this a game against the team that he was the head coach of throughout the late 1980s, but this was a game that he himself said in no uncertain terms that the Cardinals needed to win, because he didn't think they had a shot at the playoffs if you went 9-7. He basically said that the Cardinals needed to run the table if they wanted to play in the playoffs for the first time since moving out to Arizona. And seeing as the Cardinals entered this game 2 back of the final wildcard spot, his assumption seemed like a fair and valid one. Time was running out for the Cardinals to bounce back from their winless September and get back in the race. And if they lost this game and dropped to 4-7, you could pretty much stick a fork in the Cards and kiss their playoff hopes goodbye. And the good news for the Cardinals, as you can probably tell from these highlights of the game that you're watching, is that they got that much-needed victory against an Eagles team that, as we would soon find out, would be tail-spinning and would be in the middle of one of the biggest collapses in NFL history, with the Eagles dropping their second of what would be 7 straight games to end the season. As for this game, if you like touchdowns and high scoring and lots of plays by the end zone, this was not your game whatsoever, as not a single touchdown was scored. The Cardinals beat the Eagles by a final score of 4 field goals to 2, taking the game 12-6. As you might expect, Buddy Ryan's defense for the Cardinals balled out and had quite possibly their best game of the season thus far on that side of the ball. Philadelphia was just 3 for 14 on third down, converting roughly 20% of the time, and Randall Cunningham had a nightmare of a game under center for Philly, getting sacked 4 times, posting just 110 net passing yards, and going 17 for 44, completing 38% of his passes with no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 39.1, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. Arizona dominated the time of possession, holding onto the ball for over 36 minutes, as their ground game with Larry Centers, Mark Higgs, and Ronald Moore was able to give the Cards a fair amount of long, sustained drives. It wasn't the prettiest win by any means, but this game was buddy ball at its finest, and it got the Cardinals to 5-6. For a game that the Cardinals had to have, especially after losing 2 weeks ago to the same Eagles team, they accomplished their goal and salvaged their season. They still had a lot of work to do, obviously, but they were back in the hunt, now sitting just 1 game back of the 6-5 Green Bay Packers for the final wildcard spot in the NFC. Keep in mind, they had no shot at the division by this point, as the Dallas Cowboys were 9-2 after 11 games, 4 games ahead of the Cardinals with 5 to play, and in possession of the head-to-head tiebreaker, with the Cowboys having swept the Cardinals earlier in the season. So the wild card was all that the Cardinals had to play for. So yes, this was a big win, and I don't think anyone can deny that. But someone went just a little bit overboard in describing how big this win was. And that person, oddly enough, was the man who scored all 12 points for the Cardinals, nailing all 4 of his field goal attempts, even if 3 of them were from 24 yards out, and all 4 of them were relative chip shots, being from inside 40. That man was none other than Greg Davis. After this win that you've been watching this entire time, Davis spoke with the press and talked about the importance of this win. And if he said something along the lines of, "This win puts us right back in the thick of things and puts us in the playoff picture," all right, I've got no issue with that. Davis had been with the team since 1991. If he said something like, "This is the biggest win we've had since I've been here," then again, I've got no issue with that, especially seeing as not only was it a big win, but the Cardinals really didn't have any big wins to speak of from 1991 to 1993. You get the idea. If Davis said anything like that, I'm not making this video whatsoever. Alas, he did not. Because that's when Greg Davis said to reporters, I kid you not, it was the biggest win this franchise has ever had. Seriously. This 1994 game against the Philadelphia Eagles to get the Cardinals from 4-6 to 5-6, not even clinching a playoff spot, and while putting them in the hunt, not putting them in the playoffs if the season ended today, the biggest win in the history of the Cardinals. And, yeah. I don't think I need to tell you that of all the over-exaggerations in the history of the National Football League, this has to be up there with one of the biggest. Because holy over-exaggeration, Batman, this is an asinine statement to make. This game? This is the biggest win in franchise history? If you want to say the biggest win of the season, no complaints. If you want to say the biggest win since you became the Arizona Cardinals, seeing as you only became the Arizona Cardinals in 1994, again, no complaints. If you want to say the biggest win since you've gone into Arizona, again, no complaints. If you wanted to say the biggest win since the team moved to Arizona in 1988, I would disagree with the statement because I'd put that last-second victory against the San Francisco 49ers on November 6, 1988 as the biggest win, especially considering the circumstances around that game. But it's at least subjective enough where you can give a reasonable argument, and I'm not making this video, and no one's criticizing you. But the biggest win in franchise history? The entire near century-long history of the Cardinals? You do realize the Cardinals have won a championship before, right? You do realize that the Cardinals literally have a piece of hardware, right? This is like a player on the New York Jets, after a win improved their record to 5-6, saying that this was the biggest win in Jets history, as if the team didn't win a Super Bowl back in the day. This literally isn't even the biggest win that the Cardinals have ever had against the Eagles. On December 28, 1947, the Cardinals played the Eagles in the freaking NFL Championship, winning that game 28-21. Can I take a wild guess and say that winning the literal championship of the league is a bigger win than a win to improve your record from 4-6 and on the outside looking in to 5-6 and still on the outside looking in? Even if we exclude the championship, I can think of a crap ton of wins that were bigger than this 1994 game that you've been watching this entire time. You had the regular season finale in 1948, where the Chicago Cardinals played their crosstown rival, the Chicago Bears, and both teams entered the game at 10-1. So the winner of the game would play in the NFL Championship against the Philadelphia Eagles, and the loser would be eliminated. Sure enough, the Cardinals won the game 24-21, erasing an 11-point deficit late in the fourth quarter to stun the Bears and take the West Division. You had the 1974 regular season finale against the New York Giants, where the Cardinals won 26-14 to win the NFC East. You had the infamous Mel Gray Phantom Catch game from that same season. You had the penultimate game of the 1975 season when the Cardinals beat the Bears 34-20 to clinch the NFC East. You had the 1970 bloodbath on Monday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys in what was a dominant performance in front of a national television audience. You had their 1982 thriller against the Giants, where the Cardinals scored the game-winning touchdown with 30 seconds left to clinch a playoff spot and go to the Super Bowl tournament. I could go on and on, but you get the idea. In no way whatsoever was this 1994 game against the Eagles, where you'd still be outside the playoff picture and you'd still be below 500, the biggest win in the history of the Cardinals franchise. And obviously, I'm not expecting every player to be a historian of their team. To expect that would be completely unreasonable and would be a ridiculously unfair expectation. As a Jaguar fan, I don't need Trevor Lawrence to know that the Jaguars' first Monday Night Football game was in 1997 against the Steelers. I just need him to throw touchdowns and hold on to the football. It's a game, not a quiz bowl. But surely, before making statements this grand and this outlandish, you would stop to actually think about the history that you're talking about. If you're going to say something, you better be able to back it up. And this is one of those statements that you could not possibly back up in any reasonable way. If you're going to say that something is the biggest win in franchise history, and that franchise has made it to the playoffs before and has literally won a championship, you're going to come across looking really stupid. I'll put it that way. Just like you wouldn't hear a player on the New York Yankees say that a winning Game 3 of the ALDS to put the Yankees up 2-1 in the series was the biggest win in team history without getting completely lambasted for his ignorance, you shouldn't hear Greg Davis saying a statement like this. But here we are. Here we freaking are, where apparently this game was one for the record books. Despite a valiant effort by the Cardinals, the statements made by this man right here and Greg Davis would be all for nothing, as the Cardinals would miss the playoffs with an 8-8 record, losing the following week in overtime to the Chicago Bears, and losing during the final week of the season to the Atlanta Falcons. Davis would stay with the Cardinals as their kicker in 1995 and the beginning of 1996. And in 1995, he would kick in 4 of the biggest wins in franchise history, with those being a 20-17 win in Week 3 against Detroit to improve to 1-2, a 24-20 win in Week 7 against Washington to improve to 2-5, a 20-14 win in Week 9 against Seattle to improve to 3-5, and a 40-37 win in Week 13 against Atlanta to improve to 4-8. All 4 games are bigger than anything the Cardinals had ever played in before and have ever played in since. The 2008 NFC Championship, the 2015 Divisional against the Packers, and the 1998 Week 17 regular season finale against the Chargers have absolutely nothing on those games in terms of importance. Look, Greg Davis was a solid kicker, but he was not solid when it came to his history, and this is a perfect example of that. So as a word to the wise, generally speaking, if a team has won a championship before, and the win that you're talking about is a regular season win that still keeps you out of the playoffs and still keeps you below 500, it is not the greatest win in franchise history. If there ever was a case of recency bias gone wrong, this is that case right here. Because in 1994, while Greg Davis was right down the middle on his field goals, he wasn't even close to the target when it came to his history. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.